The first sound that hit me was the crunch of gravel under tires, a hard, impatient bite that carried all the way from the road to my porch steps, where I stood with a broom and the deed to my grandfather's cabin in my back pocket. I had been back in the States for exactly 1 hour, long enough to unlock the door, sweep a winter's worth of pine needles off the stoop, and breathe in the old scent of cedar and lake water that lived in the boards. That smell took me right back to summers when I was little, watching Grandpa pour coffee into a chipped mug while the dock creaked and fish jumped where the light met the water. I'd been gone 12 years working overseas, and I came home with one stubborn wish: fix up the old place on Birch Rock Lake and sit on the porch at dawn, just once, with the same quiet my granddad loved. I didn't know that the quiet was already on life support, and the woman who would pull the plug was rolling up my drive like a parade marshal who'd lost her patience for floats. She parked the golf cart crooked, blocking my mailbox on purpose. I could see it in the angle of her wheels and the way she slid off the seat like she was stepping onto a stage. She had long blonde hair that fell just so, and she was dressed to be seen. A bold red sleeveless V-neck shirt that shouted at the sun, white pants clean as a fresh sheet, a gold name badge pinned right where your eye would land. Her smile started 3 feet away from me and died 2 feet short. "You there," she said, and her voice had that brittle chime some folks use when they want you to feel small. "What is your business at this property?" I leaned the broom against the railing. "Ma'am, I'm on my own porch." "Name's Michael. Mike, if we're being neighborly." This cabin belonged to my grandfather, Charles Rowan. I tapped the soft spot on my back pocket where the deed pressed warm against my jeans. "I've got the papers if you want to see them." She took a step closer, and I caught the scent of something sharp and floral. "I'm Karen," she said, dragging the word out like it needed extra letters. "President of the Birch Rock Lakeside Association, which means everything that happens around this lake goes through me." Her eyes flicked over the peeling paint, the tired dock leaning to one side, the old tin mailbox with Rowan hand-painted on it in fading black. "And this situation is not approved." In another life, I might have laughed. Instead, I kept my voice even. "I appreciate you looking out for the neighborhood, Karen. But this property predates any association. My family's had it since 1948, I said it plain. No edge. Just the truth, steady as a heartbeat." Karen's smile vanished. The line of her mouth tightened. "No one occupies a dwelling without HOA credentials on file. No renovations without permits. No signage. No vehicles parked on unimproved surfaces. No misaligned mailbox." "No misaligned mailbox," I said, blinking. She blinked back harder. 2 degrees. It leans. It's an eyesore, and it invites vandalism. She raised her phone like a sheriff with a warrant. "I'm documenting this. If you are not an owner of record, you're trespassing. If you are an owner of record—" She paused like a magician before the reveal. "You're in violation of multiple covenants. Either way, you need to leave until this is sorted." I looked past her at the lake. It was late afternoon, and the ripples wore little caps of light moving toward us with the breeze. I wanted to step off the porch and go down to the water, say hello to the old boards, the bulrushes, the piece of shoreline I'd carried in my head for a decade and a half like a photograph. Instead, I said, "I'm not leaving my home." Something flashed in her eyes then, something hot and mean that lived way under the gold badge and the bright shirt. "You have 5 minutes," she said, "or I call the police." "Call," I said. "Calm. I'll wait." For a second, she didn't seem to know what to do with a man who didn't flinch. Then she pulled the phone up to her ear and turned away, speaking fast, her long blonde hair swinging like a flag of warning. As she talked, 3 people in matching polos appeared at the end of my drive, shuffling forward like deputies in training. A neighbor across the lane, a thick-set guy with a sunburned neck, stopped pushing his mower and stared. Curtains twitched. A dog barked. You could feel the whole street leaning in to listen. "While we're waiting," Karen said when she hung up, "I'll need your identification. And your keys. We'll secure the property." I shook my head, a small, polite no. "No, ma'am." "Sir," she snapped, and the word came out hard enough to cut. "You are not in charge here." Before I could answer, distant sirens kissed the air. That sound can make an honest man feel guilty. It made me think, briefly, stupidly, about all the things that could go wrong in America when the police show up. I put both hands on the rail and took a breath. All right, I said into the space where the sirens got louder. Let's do this. And hey, if you like real stories about neighborhoods, power trips, and standing your ground the right way, go on and hit that like button, tap subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps more than you know, and it keeps this kind of true American story coming. Now stick with me, because the next 6 minutes changed everything. The first cruiser pulled up fast, nose heavy, dust lifting around the tires. The second eased in behind it. 2 officers stepped out, both of them young enough to make me feel my age. Both of them doing that quiet, watchful scan of the scene that cops do when the call might turn sticky. One had a calm face and eyes that took everything in. The other looked like a man who appreciated when folks made his day simple. The calm one, his name tag read Gomez, looked at my empty hands. The broom, the porch, the 3 matching polo people now standing shoulder to shoulder like proud pines. He looked at Karen, who was already pointing. "That's him," she said, voice pitched high enough to carry to the lake. "Trespassing, vandalism, threatening behavior. He refuses to show ID and he's trying to occupy property under our jurisdiction." Officer Gomez kept his eyes on me. "Sir, I'm Officer Gomez with the county. Can I see some identification and any documentation you have for the property?" "Of course," I said, keeping my movement slow because it never hurts to be careful. I pulled my wallet out, handed him my license, then slid the folded deed from my back pocket and offered it up like a prayer. "My name is Michael Rowan. My granddad, Charles Rowan, bought this cabin in 1948. I flew back from overseas to fix it up. I've been here an hour." Gomez took the papers. The other officer stood a step behind him, eyes tracking the scene, jaw set. Karen made a sound like she'd stepped on a tack. "Forgery," she said. "I told you. He's unstable. He threatened me." Now that one I wasn't going to let hang. "Officer," I said, "the only thing I've threatened today is a broom full of pine needles. She told me to get off my own porch." I said no. Gomez's partner lifted his radio, the way you lift a hammer when it's time to hit a nail. "Dispatch, copy deed verification," he said, and read out the lot numbers like he'd been doing it since birth. The 3 in polos shifted, uncomfortable. Karen's lips pressed together so tight they went white around the edges. While they waited on dispatch, Karen didn't rest. She moved like a hostess at a restaurant with too few tables and too many demands, flitting from one of her board members to another, whispering instructions. A drone buzzed up, God knows whose, and started filming my roof like we were counting shingles for fun. The guy with the mower pulled his phone out and pointed it at me like I was a raccoon who'd raided his trash. A woman I'd waved to when I pulled in backed out of her driveway and parked so her bumper faced my mailbox, my crooked, apparently criminal mailbox, and sat there with her arms crossed. "Sir," Gomez said after a minute, still polite, still steady, "dispatch is working on it. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to remain on the porch." "Happy to," I said. "I'm not looking to escalate anything." That word, escalate, landed like bait in the water. Karen took it and pulled. "Officer," she said, stepping in close enough that I could count the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, "this man is antagonizing the community. He's non-compliant. He's a threat." Then she turned her head so the officers could see, but I couldn't miss it, and smirked. It wasn't big, just enough to let me know she enjoyed this part of her day. Somewhere in the back of my mind a voice said, "Don't rise to it." And another voice, older and shaped like my granddad, said, "Use your training, son. Be right, not loud." Here's the part I hadn't told her. I wasn't just a grateful grandson with a hammer and a box of deck screws in the truck. I was a real estate attorney with a focus on land trusts and old property lines, which is a fancy way of saying I read fine print for a living, and I knew this cabin's history like I knew my own name. Birch Rock Lake's shoreline was complicated, a patchwork quilt of parcels carved long before anyone dreamed up a Lakeside association. The cabin sat inside a trust that predated the HOA by decades. My family's rights were older than Karen's badge by half a century, and if push came to shove, the law would say so. When dispatch crackled back, Gomez listened in silence, nodding once. He looked over the top of the deed at me and said, "Mr. Rowan, Your identification is valid, and the deed checks out at first pass. Your family trust is recorded and remains active. I'm going to ask you to keep a copy of that deed handy for the next few weeks just in case. Karen took a fast step forward. That can't be right. Our bylaws— Ma'am, the other officer said, not unkind but not moving an inch. Bylaws don't beat recorded property rights. You could feel the neighborhood hear that. Somewhere across the lane, a screen door squeaked open, and a child said, loud and clear, "Mom, is the lady wrong?" The kid's voice carried like a pebble skipping across water. Karen heard it too, and something in her posture sharpened further. She pointed at me and said, like she was throwing something heavy, "He is in violation of multiple covenants. This board has voted to remove disruptive elements." "We are within our rights," Gomez shook his head. "There's no vote that removes a legal owner from his own property." Her cheeks went pink, then red to match that bold, sleeveless V-neck shirt that gleamed like a stoplight. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "He's manipulating you." She looked back at her board members, searching for one of them to nod, to back her play, to give her the feeling of control she wore like perfume. Instead, one of them, tall, sloping shoulders, hairline already losing the fight, looked at me with a tilted chin and said, "We can fine you every day until you sell." There it was, the real plan peeking out like weeds between bricks. Bleed a man dry with paper and pretend it's order. I could feel a warm little pulse of anger under my ribs, a low thrum, the kind that makes your fingers itch and your voice want to climb a ladder. But anger is a poor carpenter. It builds crooked. So I did what I knew would work better. I took out my phone and called the one person I trusted to push the right buttons fast. "Nate," I said when he answered, "it's Mike. Listen up. Birch Rock Lakeside Association is asserting jurisdiction over Rowan Trust parcels." Nate blew out a breath. "They can't. We flagged that in the trust review last year." "Yup. They're in my driveway with 2 cops and 3 board members in matching shirts. They're posting violations. They sent a drone up." "Drone? Good grief." "Okay." A pause. I heard keys clacking. "I'm pulling the trust file now. You want me to hit the emergency injunction clause? Do it. And send a copy to the county land office and the state AG's consumer division. Include the note about dues collected on non-HOA parcels." I kept my voice level in the warm air. "And Nate, make it quick." "On it." I hung up and looked at the lake because looking at the lake has always been how I remind myself I'm part of something steady and older than whatever trouble just rolled up. The light had climbed toward evening, and the water wore stripes of silver where the wind stroked it. The dock, old as sin and twice as stubborn, creaked as if to say, "We've seen worse, kid." Phones started buzzing. First one, then another, then a chorus. It was subtle at first, people peeking at their screens, brows knitting. One of the board members touched his pocket like it had bitten him. The guy with the mower took 2 steps toward his porch and stopped to read a ping that lit his phone. Karen looked down at her screen, and I watched the color drain from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "What is this?" she said to no one and everyone. "Cease and desist? Suspension review?" Her thumb tapped hard. "This is harassment." The other officer said, "Ma'am, is that a legal notice?" Her eyes shot up. For a second, honest fear flashed there, quick and raw. Then it was gone, replaced by something tougher. "It's nothing," she snapped, a beat too late. "Irrelevant." Gomez's phone buzzed too, and he glanced at it, then at me, then at Karen. "Ma'am, the county land office just forwarded a petition to suspend your association's enforcement powers, pending a review of jurisdiction over certain parcels. Looks like the Rowan Trust is among them." A sound rose from the neighbors, gathered like a low tide. Surprise, disbelief, relief, a laugh here and there from folks who'd been sitting on their hands for too long. A gray-haired man in a twins cap said to the woman beside him, maybe louder than he meant to, "I told you they were playing fast and loose." Karen stepped toward Gomez like she could push the words back into his mouth. "This is a mistake. They can't do this to me." Gomez gave a patient shrug. "They didn't do it to you, ma'am. They did it to the association." "Same thing," she said, and it slipped out with so much heat the mask fell for a second, and I saw her naked belief. That the HOA was her skin, her stage, her reason. If someone took it, who was she going to be? Not to us, to herself. A silver sedan turned into the lane then, official brown plates flashing, the county seal tight on the door. A city inspector stepped out with a clipboard and a measuring wheel, and the same calm walk I'd seen 1,000 times in my career. He took in the scene, the cruisers, the drone, the cluster of neighbors, the woman in the bright red top, took off his sunglasses like a man removing a hat in church, and said, "I'm looking for the association president." Karen straightened. "That's me." "I'm here on an expedited records request," he said, polite enough but caring no doubt. "I'll need full access to your bylaws, board minutes, bank records, enforcement logs, and correspondence related to jurisdiction claims over trust parcels, including Rowan trust lots." Her face worked like a hand had tightened inside it. "We are a private association. We will not be bullied, ma'am," the inspector said gently. "You took public enforcement action with law enforcement present over disputed jurisdiction. At that moment, your records concerning those actions became part of a public inquiry. Please produce them." The tall board member shifted from foot to foot. His eyes jumped from Karen to the inspector to the neighbors and back. Then he said, too loud in the quiet, "Karen, tell him about the pool money." You could have heard a minnow burp after that. Karen didn't blink. She smiled the thinnest smile I've ever seen and said, "Slow as honey. Stan, that's not relevant." The inspector clicked his pen and wrote something on his clipboard, like a man marking a tree to cut later. "Pool money?" Stan swallowed. "Last month, she moved 40 grand from the HOA account to improve the community center, except," he gestured to our stretch of cabins and trees and sky. "We don't have a community center." Karen's head snapped toward him. "Stop talking," she bit off. "I'm going to need all your financials," the inspector said, not unkind, not surprised. "Today." Phones buzzed again, a cascade this time, like summer locusts. People started muttering in little bites. "What's that mean? Charter suspension? Refund?" A woman in a blue windbreaker laughed once, the kind of laugh that has tears hiding behind it, and said, "Maybe I can finally plant my peonies without a citation." Karen's hands clenched and unclenched, slow, controlled. She looked at me. For the first time since she'd swung that cart into my drive, she really looked at me. "You did this," she said. I shook my head. "You did this." Gomez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you're going to want to cooperate." She stood there in that red sleeveless V-neck and those crisp white pants, hair perfect, eyes throwing sparks, and I saw the whole story of her in the set of her jaw. A person who needed the world to be tidy and obedient and just so, and who had learned that if you said words like bylaws and harmonious appearance with enough force, people would nod and get small. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she pointed at my porch and said, voice shaking now with more than anger, "This is not over." And I said, "Steady. It is over if you keep crossing lines that aren't yours." The inspector asked for the key to the records cabinet. Karen said, "It's gone. Gone. It's been misplaced." She lifted her chin. "We'll find it." The inspector wrote more. "Ma'am, if records are being concealed or destroyed, that's a separate offense." She smiled again, unreal and blinding, the kind of smile folks wear in old campaign photos. "No one is destroying anything." The drone came lower, as if it wanted to smell the tension. A gust kicked up, and the old Rowan mailbox leaned another degree, just to irritate the universe. Somewhere behind us, a screen door banged, and someone yelled, "Told ya!" And laughter ran across the yards like a little wind of relief. Over the next week, it played out faster than I expected and slower than I wanted. The county confirmed what the trust had always said. Our parcel, and several others, sat outside HOA jurisdiction. The emergency injunction froze the association's enforcement power on disputed lots. The inspector's office opened an audit that took on weight like a snowball rolling downhill. Bylaws filed wrong, fines applied to parcels not covered, money moved to line items that didn't exist, checks written to a contractor at Karen's home address for community hospitality upgrades. Those upgrades looked a lot like patio furniture around a private pool that no one had seen except Karen and her friends. The board fractured, first in whispers, then in emails that leaked and texts that got forwarded to the wrong people at the wrong time. The tall guy, Stan, turned out to have a conscience when it counted. He gave statements. He cried once, on his front step, head in his hands, while his wife rubbed circles on his back and neighbors walked by slow, saying nothing, just being there the way good people do when someone finally does the right thing and it hurts. Another board member, the one with the tight ponytail who'd slapped a violator sticker on my mailbox like it was her birthday, moved out at night, a U-Haul rolling away at 2 in the morning, like a ship slipping its mooring to find a friendlier port. As for Karen, I saw less and less of her during the day, and more of her name in emails from the inspector's office with words like subpoena and records demand and failure to comply. When I did see her, she was dressed the same. Red tops, white pants, that gold badge like a shield. But something in the shoulders had dropped. The smile didn't reach her eyes. She drove the golf cart slower. She looked smaller even when she stood on her toes. Meanwhile, normal life cracked its knuckles and stretched. Folks started doing small things they'd wanted to do for years without getting a letter. A man 2 doors down put a bright little gnome in his garden because his wife thought it was funny, and no one wrote him a ticket. The couple across the lane painted their shutters light blue to match the sky, and it looked lovely and the world didn't end. A widow at the bend in the road set out a swing for her grandkids, and every afternoon she sat there with lemonade and a book, and no one made her take it down. I fixed the dock. Grandpa always said a good dock is a handshake with the water. And I rebuilt the porch rail level and true and bought a new mailbox that stood plumb and proud. I left the old one on the shelf in the shed because it had earned retirement. I slept too. The kind of sleep that drops you deep and holds you quiet. The kind you only get when a worry you've carried for too long finally climbs off your back and goes wherever worries go when they're done. The lake made its night sounds, and I listened the way you listen to a loved one breathe in the dark. You'd think that would be the end, right? The good guys breathe, the bad guys get a talking to, and the neighborhood learns something soft about community. That's what TV promises. But this is real life, and real life has little hooks under nearly every surface. The first hook was a letter from the county announcing the association's charter was formally suspended pending the outcome of the audit. That meant no fines, no warnings, no door tags, no menacing drones. It meant an interim committee of homeowners, not board members, would review any true safety concerns. People clapped at that, literally clapped, in their yards and on their porches and in the grocery store checkout line when they saw the news on their phones. You could feel the place exhale. The second hook was uglier and hit quicker. It was a plain envelope on my doormat one twilight. No return address, no stamp, just hand-delivered with a knock that was more a tap than a knock. Inside was a single HOA invoice from 3 years back. An invoice that had never been mailed to me because I wasn't even in the country then. Stamped paid in blue ink that had bled a little. Paper clipped to it was a note in block letters. You didn't catch all of it. I stood in my kitchen with the envelope open on the table and listened to the night. Across the water, a light flipped on in a cabin that hadn't shown a lick of life all day. It stayed on long enough for me to wonder who it was, then snapped off. I felt that old thrum in my chest again, the one that makes your palms want to close into fists and your voice want to run ahead of your sense. I took a breath, then another. Okay, I said out loud to the empty room. Okay. The next morning I drove into town and sat down with the auditor assigned to the case, a tidy woman with sharp eyes and the kind of patience you learn from raising teenagers or working with people who like to lie. I handed her the envelope. Someone wanted me to see this, I said. She studied the invoice. This is paid with a cashier's check drawn on... Huh? She tapped the paper. That's odd. This check is from the association account, but the payee is you. I wasn't here, I said. She nodded. Exactly. Which means someone refunded you for dues you never paid, or laundered a payment through your name to make the books balance. I felt it then, a handful of puzzle pieces knocking into place in my head in a new pattern. If they'd used my name, whose else had they used? How many refunds went out to owners who'd never seen a dime? How deep did the pool go? And were those patio chairs on Karen's deck bought with water money while folks argued about whether a flower pot was an eyesore? The auditor looked up. Mr. Rowan, would you be willing to make a statement? I would, I said. I'll also get you a list of neighbors who mentioned strange notices or refunds. That evening, I walked the lane like a man making amends. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I know how scared folks get when you say the word investigation where they live. People told me stories on their porches, by their mailboxes, at the edge of my dock where the planks smelled like sunshine. A retired nurse with silver hair said Karen had once waved a violation in her face for leaving a 10-year-old bird bath by her steps. Said it was not in harmony, she said, and her mouth twisted around the word. What kind of person hates birds? A Vietnam vet told me the association had sent him 3 warnings for a flag that wasn't folded to standard when it rained. I know a thing or two about standards, he said quiet. That woman never carried a pack in August. He chuckled then, and the sound warmed the air. I kept the flag up. A widower down near the point said he'd paid an extra 100 every quarter for something called a lake enjoyment fee. Seems steep, he said. Then I remembered I'm the one who enjoys the lake, so I stopped paying. Got 6 letters. Stopped opening them. I wrote names. I wrote dates. I wrote the names of folks who were tired of fighting and folks who'd never fought at all. I wrote the story of a place that wanted to be a neighborhood again instead of a stage for one woman's control issues dressed up in red and white. When the charges came, they came in a soft-voiced press release the county clerk read into a microphone with a flag behind her and a stack of folders at her elbow. Fraud, misuse of funds, filing false reports, destruction of records, conspiracy. Though they didn't use that big word. They said coordination among multiple individuals. Karen was named. So was Stan, though he'd cooperated, and the woman with the tight ponytail who'd moved out, and another board member who'd done most of the money moving with the kind of confidence you only get from not being caught for too long. The night the news hit, a small group gathered on the grassy patch by the boat landing. No speeches, no fireworks, just folks standing together, nodding, letting their shoulders drop. Someone brought iced tea, someone brought store-bought cookies. A boy ran a red wagon in a wide circle and fell twice and popped up laughing. Proof that the world was still the world. I stood next to the inspector and the auditor, who'd come in plain clothes because they were off duty and just wanted to see the lake at sunset. You know, the inspector said, we do a lot of these, and most of the time, it doesn't end with people being kinder to each other. But sometimes it does. He looked at the water where the sky spilled gold and blue into ripples. This might be one of those times. I hoped he was right. I still do. But hope is a candle in a draft. It needs tending. After the association was officially dissolved, we held a meeting under the big cottonwood tree by the church. No titles, no badges, no bright red shirts marking rank, just neighbors with folding chairs and a couple of dogs who lay down inside. We talked about how we wanted to live, not with no rules, that's how you get trouble of a different color, but with common sense. Keep the place neat. Help a neighbor when you can. Don't be a jerk. If someone's music's too loud, ask nice. If a porch sags, offer to hold a board while someone hammers. If you've got an issue, talk face to face before you write a letter. It wasn't complicated because good things rarely are. We put together a little volunteer group to keep an eye on true problems. Downed limbs after storms, culverts that clog, the old boat ramp that needs patching. We collected donations in a clear coffee can with a slit cut in the lid, and we counted the money once a month in the open air with everybody watching, because that's how trust is made, in daylight, with hands visible and voices steady. One late afternoon, not long after the meeting, I was on my porch sanding the rail smooth when a familiar crunch of tires rolled over my gravel. The golf cart idled at the bottom of my steps like an animal considering whether to bite. Karen sat behind the wheel. She didn't get out right away. She looked at the lake for a long breath, then another. Finally, she stood. No badge. Same red sleeveless V-neck, somehow duller in the shade. Same white pants, not as crisp. Hair still perfect because some habits die slower than others. I set the sander down. Karen. Michael. She said it in that careful way people use when they're trying words on for fit. I came to bring you something. She handed me a manila envelope, thick with documents. Copies, she said, of minutes. and bank statements and emails. I made them before. She let the sentence die the way you let go of a kite string when you're tired of fighting the wind. Why bring them to me? I asked and kept any blame out of my voice because I've learned that blame shuts doors, and I wanted to leave one open, just a crack, to see if any light could get in. She looked down at her hands. The red polish on her nails was chipped. Because you started it, she said, small. Then after a beat, and because I don't want to be the villain forever. I took the envelope. It was heavier than paper, if you know what I mean. You know you hurt people, I said gently. I know. Her eyes were wet in that way some folks would call weak and I'd call human. I liked the feeling of everyone needing me. I liked being right. It felt like being safe. She swallowed. I wasn't safe before this. Not for a long time. This made me feel like I mattered. You could matter in ways that don't make people small, I said. You could matter by being kind. She laughed once, sharp and not mean. Kindness is harder. You can't measure it on a spreadsheet. Maybe not, I said, but you can feel it from your porch. She nodded. I won't be staying, she said. And there was such an old tired in that voice it made my chest ache. I thought I'd tear this place down and rebuild it in my own image. And she lifted one hand in a half shrug that meant she finally knew better. Turns out it was fine before me. Maybe better. I'm going to sell and go closer to my sister. I didn't say good. I didn't say sorry. I said, I wish you peace. And I meant it, which surprised me until I realized forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as anyone else. She turned to go, then stopped. I liked your mailbox better crooked, she said. And for a second, the corner of her mouth twitched like a person who remembered how to smile for real. After she left, I set the envelope on the table inside and made coffee the old way. Percolator, slow, strong, smells like a memory. I took a cup down to the dock and sat there while the sun went down pink and orange in a way that would look fake if you painted it. A bass jumped. A loon called. The boards under me were new, but the sound they made was the same as the sound in my grandfather's time. And that felt right, like a hand on my shoulder from someone you love. You might be wondering how it all truly ended, if there was some neat bow to tie on this, some final gavel and a chorus of, take that. Life's knots don't like bows. Karen took a plea. The others did too. Restitution was ordered. Some money came back. Not all. It never does. People moved on or learned to live with the little scar that's left when a place that's supposed to hold you safe gets used to push you around. The volunteer group fixed the boat ramp with a Saturday's work in a borrowed mixer. The widow's swing got painted bright yellow by teenagers who showed up because someone asked and because pizza was promised and because community is contagious if you let it be. The vet with the flag taught a new kid the right way to fold it and the right time to fly it, and the bird bath stayed and birds used it because that's what birds do when you set out a little water and mind your business. As for me, I found myself waking early, not because I had to, but because dawn is a miracle you can set your watch to. I poured coffee into that old chipped mug of Grandpa's and sat on the porch with the deed on a shelf inside and the lake out front, and the knowledge that sometimes you stand up and sometimes the wind stands up with you. I learned again that the trick is not to get louder, it's to get clearer, to say no when no is the right answer, and yes when yes will mean somebody's life gets easier in some small way. One last thing before we part. These stories, real as rain and tough as old rope, live because folks like you care to hear them. If you found yourself leaning in, if you felt that little spark that says, people can still do right, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next one. It helps in a way that's bigger than the button. It tells the algorithm, sure, but it also tells me you're out there, nodding on your porch, pulling for the better angels. And stick around, because out on Birch Rock Lake, when the wind's right, you can hear a knock at the door in the evening, soft as a question, and sometimes when you open it, all that's there is a plain envelope and a line that reads, "You didn't catch all of it," which is how I knew as I turned that note over in my hand and looked out at the dark cabin across the water with the light that kept flicking on and off like a heartbeat, that this wasn't a single story. It was the first of many. And the next time someone in a bold red sleeveless V-neck and white pants thinks they can take a place like this and bend it to their will, well, they're going to find out we've got longer memories than that and steadier hands. So come on back for the next chapter. Bring your coffee. Bring your patience. Bring the part of you that believes we can do better than fear and fines and little drones buzzing our roofs. I'll be right here, telling the truth the way ordinary people tell it, in plain words with steady eyes and a porch that faces the water.